All right, let's go. Let's move on to something that's important and near and dear to my heart, which is AJ Woodson and the issue of race, and we'll get right to it. AJ, good morning.
Good morning, good morning, good morning.
I don't know if you heard my preamble leading up to this, AJ, but what I wanted to say to you was straight out question. I was doing my story today about the Confederate flag.
Okay.
And I was looking at the wackos that are standing out on the street still waving it, white people, even a couple of young people. What does it feel like to be a black man in America and see that still in this day and age?
Well, I mean, it's a symbol of racism to a lot of people. Specifically, I mean, the systematic racism is bigger than the flying of a flag. So you can get rid of the flag today, and the racism still exists. So, that's how I feel about it.
Okay. Now, racism still exists, but what about inside? What is it? What about as an individual? Can you dismiss it? Do you let it roll off your back? I mean, I know that if I saw people, and see, that's why I don't believe in a lot of flags. You'll never see me wearing an Italian flag on I got one flag only. But in even rallying around any flag that has to do with because of where you come from rather than what you believe in is troubling. But be that as it may, if someone could create a flag that was anti-Italian, I guess, or Italian-American, and in effect it said, yeah, we think you're less than human, it would bother me no end.
Well, I will say this, for real. The flag wasn't created anti-African American.
Well, that's true.
Black or whatever you want.
You're being very fair there. Yes.
Yeah, it was a symbol of the I guess
of a new country.
Whatever. Yeah.
In fact, there are books about it. If I may interject there are actually books about it. If you go into the history, to be fair to them in their mindset at the time, when I say them, I mean the people that rebelled and formed the Confederate States of America, they actually felt it was their birthright to carry the original flag. Because after all, you had Washington and was a Virginian and so forth.
So that being said, then it was a group of people who were racist, and they adopted that as their flag.
Now we're talking.
That's different than
yes.
So I can even understand. I lived in Atlanta for 10 years, so you couldn't go nowhere. I mean, even at my church, it was across the street. There was a house with a big Confederate flag flying across the street. So I mean, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing it.
Yep.
And not to offend anyone, the reason I am not as vocal about the Confederate flag coming down as
it's that late morning traffic
as much as other people is because there's been a lot of racist acts committed under the American flag to black people.
Well, that's very true. It is not.
So I mean, so if you get rid of slavery and all of these things, these all took place under the American flag. So, I mean, if we took every flag that was offensive to anybody, we wouldn't have any flags. You know what I'm saying? So,
well, no. Actually, you're being very fair about it, and which in many ways is refreshing. That
and I will say this too. I had posted something on Facebook which rubbed a few people the wrong way.
What did you post? Come on, fess up.
But it was about black people celebrating the 4th of July. July 4th, 1776, black people were not free. So,
well, that's true, and I've wrestled with that. Let me remind folks what we're doing here. It's 9:13. We are talking with AJ Woodson. He's the editor of Black Westchester Magazine, also a photographer of some note, which we'll talk about a little later and even have a little fun with him. I have often thought, and this is something that I scratch my head about, that had I been black, it would have been hard for me to want to defend my country back in the day, but yet they did. And it's better now. So I'm of two minds. Now I think that because we are driven by ideas rather than locale and by ethnicity, and despite racism, ultimately those ideas are going to win out, and we've seen that with the election of a black president. We've seen that. I'm a lot older than you, AJ, and I hate saying that, by the way. But when I was a kid, you didn't see anybody black on television. In fact, the funny thing was, there was, and now he's in all this trouble, but there was Cosby, and I guess on the movies there were a couple of actors. But basically, we could even watch something like that Mayberry show. How do you not have black people in a southern town? Well, so now it's changed greatly. So now it would seem to me there might be something to celebrate about the 4th of July. What say you?
Well, two things about that. One, a lot of people are celebrating. And as far as a historical point, we've had our first African American president.
Yes.
That didn't change the country. Like it brought out the proof that there was more, that racism was still alive.
I have to agree with that. I do.
So I think a lot of black people were under the assumption that now that we have a black president, I don't want to say all our problems are gone, but life is going to be so much better. But he's just one person, and there was no way he could change years and years of systematic.
Yes, but if I can, this may sound like a twist on what you're saying, so bear with me. 9:15. My observation has been that having a black president has surfaced and has brought out in the open, much the same way a medication might bring a pimple to a head. It's been ugly, but I think it'll have long-term. It will have long-term positive consequences as we pass through now 9:15. In a minute, I do have to go to break, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with AJ Woodson. Actually, we're coming near the where we have to move on. Question.
Yes.
And I want to have some fun with you now that you've had you've been kind enough to answer those questions as directly as you have.
Not a problem. That's what I do. That's
no, I know that, but. Do you still look like Al Roker instead of Bob Marrone?
Yes, I'm still clean shaven. Yes.
I tell you, I've been having fun with that. I had Damon on the other day, and I told him about your transition.
Now, let me just tell you, I did this back in the days, and the person wasn't Al Roker. I don't know if you remember Spencer for Hire.
Sure, I do.
Avery Brooks was the coolest symbol of blackness back then.
That's true.
And that I shaved my head back then.
You shaved your... Now, did you actually have a full head of hair to shave then?
Yeah, I had a big afro.
Actually, you still do now with your dreads and everything. I saw somebody...
I have a full head. Yeah, I have a big. I would have a big afro if I let it grow out.
No, because I was in a store the other night and I was chatting with a guy who had dreads a little longer than the ones you had. Didn't have the beard, and I was telling somebody. I said my friend AJ Woodson looked like that. Now he looks like Al Roker. The guy said, "Get out of here."
Yeah, well, I looked like that before. So before I left to go to Georgia, that's how I looked. When I came back. Everybody looked at me like, wow, what the heck? Because they couldn't recognize me. Then they finally got used to it, and then I cut them. So
one more question, if I might want to go to some local politics. 9:17. We're talking with AJ Woodson here on News Talk 1230 WFAS, the 9 o'clock edition of the morning show, where we get into conversation and calls as early as possible, and we did that now. We saw where there was a shooting in Mount Vernon, and where the young upstart, and he's actually starting to get his campaign rolling, Richard Thomas, came out of the box, not only saying that this was the incumbent administration's fault, but then he came out with a second press release saying that his letter to the comptroller to release Ernie Davis of his responsibilities because of his prior convictions. How much of that is saber-rattling, and how much of that is going to make a difference, or is it all just part of the campaign?
Well, he had on June 9th, he actually had a press conference at the steps of City Hall calling for the removal of the mayor per an interpretation of the charter, which says if you willfully break any part of any law, I can't quote it because I can't remember it right now, even in charge of a misdemeanor, you must forfeit your office. And Davis says his lawyers told him that he doesn't have to. And Rich called for the Attorney General, which he had heard nothing back. And then I understand he just heard back from him, and the Attorney General said he needed an official letter, a demand letter or whatever it was called, and he filed that yesterday, and I have a copy of it. It's stamped saying they received it. So
I have a copy of it too. Absolutely.
His office has received it, and I believe they have 5 days to answer it, whether they're going to, I guess, look into it and see if they're going to uphold that or, dismiss it or whatever. I don't know. There's a lot of people that feel he should go and he shouldn't be mayor.
And also it would change the landscape, because with 6 people running against an incumbent, boy, is that ever going to dilute the vote?
Well, that would definitely change, because I think a lot of people don't realize if he is found that he had to forfeit his office as of October 2014, and because he was charged with a misdemeanor and he pled guilty, he would still be on probation in November. So I don't know if that means he can run then. I don't think, that's a question no one's asked. If he is removed, can he then run for that same office that he's just been removed from when he's still on the probation that got him removed?
I don't know how they do that retroactively.
I called into the Attorney General. I'm waiting, hoping to hear from him today or tomorrow. And I would like